What if I told you that the retirement rule you've been following for decades, the one that's been repeated by every financial advisor, every retirement calculator, every how to retire video on YouTube, is fundamentally broken? And what's worse, if you're planning to retire in 2025 or 2026, following this outdated advice could cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, or even worse, force you to run out of money years before you die. I'm talking about the famous 4% rule. You know the one: withdraw 4% of your nest egg in year 1, adjust for inflation each year after, and your money will supposedly last 30 years. Here's the problem. That rule was created in 1994, 32 years ago. Back when interest rates were different, inflation behaved differently, people didn't live as long, and the market looked completely different than it does today. According to Morningstar's latest 2025 research, literally published just weeks ago, if you're retiring in 2026, your safe withdrawal rate is actually 3.9%, not 4%. That might not sound like much, but on a $1 million portfolio, that's $10,000 less per year you can safely spend. But here's where it gets interesting. What if I also told you that depending on how you structure your withdrawals, you could potentially start at 5.7%, almost 50% more than the traditional rule, and still not run out of money? Today, I'm going to show you exactly what's broken about the 4% rule, share the real numbers you should be using in 2026, and reveal the modern retirement withdrawal strategies that the smartest financial planners are now recommending. These are strategies that could let you spend tens of thousands more during your retirement, or protect you from one of the biggest risks that the old 4% rule completely ignores. Let's dive in. So why exactly is the 4% rule broken? Let me break down the 4 massive problems that nobody talks about. Problem number 1 is the world has changed. The 4% rule was created by financial planner William Bengen in 1994, based on historical market data going back to 1926. His research, which later became known as the Trinity Study, concluded that if you withdrew 4% of your portfolio in year 1 and adjusted for inflation each year after, your money would supposedly last 30 years. And you know what? At the time, it was revolutionary. It gave retirees a simple rule of thumb. But here's what's changed since 1994. First, life expectancy. In 1994, the average American lived to about 75 years. Today, according to the latest data, we're living to almost 80 years on average. And if you're healthy and retiring at 65, there's a very real chance you'll live into your 90s or beyond. The 4% rule was designed for a 30-year retirement. What if you need your money to last 35 or even 40 years? Second, interest rates and bond yields. When the 4% rule was created, you could get 6 to 8% on relatively safe bonds. Today, even with recent increases, bond yields are nowhere near those levels. This means your portfolio can't generate the same income it used to without taking on more risk. Third, inflation volatility. Remember 2022 when inflation hit 9%? While it's moderated to around 2.3% as of April 2025, we've seen that inflation can spike unexpectedly. According to Schroders' 2025 retirement study, 92% of retirees are now concerned about inflation eating away at their assets. The old 4% rule with automatic inflation adjustments can actually hurt you in high inflation years. The sequence of returns risk. This is the killer that the 4% rule doesn't adequately address. Let me explain with a story. Imagine 2 people, let's call them Sarah and Mike. Both retire with exactly $1 million. Both follow the 4% rule, withdrawing $40,000 in year 1. Sarah retires in a year when the market immediately drops 20%. Mike retires in a year when the market goes up 20%. Even if they both experience the exact same returns over their retirement, just in a different order, Sarah is far more likely to run out of money. Why? Because she's forced to sell stocks when they're down, locking in losses, and she never recovers that lost capital. This is called sequence of returns risk, and it's brutal for early retirees. Research shows that the first 5 to 10 years of retirement are absolutely critical. Poor returns during this fragile decade can permanently damage your portfolio, even if the market does great later on. The 4% rule treats every year the same. It doesn't care if you're retiring into a bear market or a bull market. That's a massive blind spot. Problem number 3 is one size fits all doesn't work. Here's something that might surprise you. According to JP Morgan's December 2025 research, retiree spending is not uniform. The 4% rule assumes you'll spend the same amount every year, adjusted for inflation, for 30 years. But that's not how real retirement works. Most people actually spend in a retirement smile pattern. Higher spending in the early go-go years from ages 65 to 75 when you're healthy and want to travel, lower spending in the middle slow-go years from ages 75 to 85 when you're less active, higher spending again in the late no-go years 85 plus due to healthcare costs. The 4% rule completely ignores this reality. Problem number 4, it's too rigid and too conservative. This might sound contradictory, but hear me out. The 4% rule is too rigid because it doesn't let you adjust when markets are doing great. If your portfolio doubles, you're still locked into that same withdrawal amount plus inflation. You could be leaving hundreds of thousands on the table. But it's also too conservative for some people. The 4% rule was designed to give you a 95% chance of success, meaning your money would last in 95 out of 100 historical scenarios. That sounds great, but here's the catch. In most of those scenarios, you die with 2 to 4 times your starting portfolio. If you don't care about leaving a big inheritance and want to actually enjoy your money, the 4% rule might be forcing you to live far below your means. Alright, so the 4% rule is broken. What should you use instead? This is where it gets really exciting, because researchers at Morningstar just published their 2025 State of Retirement Income Report, literally updated for people retiring right now in 2025 and 2026. And they've identified several strategies that range from conservative to aggressive. Let me walk you through them, starting with the baseline. Strategy number 1, the new baseline, 3.9%, conservative. For people who want the most predictable paycheck-like income, the modern equivalent of the 4% rule, Morningstar recommends starting at 3.9% for 2026 retirees. Yes, it's lower than 4%, but here's why. This rate is based on forward-looking estimates of stock returns, bond returns, and inflation, not just historical data. It gives you a 90% probability that your money will last at least 30 years with steady inflation-adjusted income. Let's do the math. $500,000 portfolio equals $19,500 first-year withdrawal. $1 million equals $39,000 first-year withdrawal. $2 million equals $78,000 first-year withdrawal. Each year, you'd adjust for inflation, regardless of how your portfolio performs. Whose this is for? People who want maximum security, predictable income, and can't tolerate their spending fluctuating year to year. If you have a tight budget and absolutely need to know what you'll have to spend, this is your strategy. The downside, it's conservative. In many scenarios, you'll die with a lot of money left over, and if markets do well, you're not taking advantage of those gains. Strategy number 2, inflation ceiling method, 4.4%, moderate conservative. Here's your first flexible strategy, and it addresses one of the big problems with the traditional approach, runaway inflation adjustments. With this method, you start at 4.4%, already higher than the baseline. But here's the key difference. You skip inflation adjustments for 3 years if your portfolio is underperforming. Here's how it works. Year 1, withdraw 4.4% of your $1 million, equals $44,000. Year 2, if your portfolio grew, adjust for inflation. If it shrank, keep withdrawing $44,000. Year 3, same rule applies. Year 4, resume normal inflation adjustments. This simple tweak protects you during market downturns. You're not forced to withdraw more dollars from a shrinking portfolio during bad years. And because you're giving your portfolio breathing room, you can start with a higher initial rate. Whose this is for? People who want somewhat predictable income but can handle their budget being frozen during rough market years. You're not cutting spending, you're just not increasing it for inflation temporarily. Strategy number 3, Vanguard dynamic spending, 5.1%, moderate. Now we're getting into the middle-of-the-road approaches that can really boost your spending. This one is fascinating. With Vanguard's dynamic spending method, you start at 5.1%, almost 30% more than the baseline. But here's the key difference. Your withdrawal amount will fluctuate year to year within Guardrails. Here's how it works. Each year, you recalculate what 5.1% of your current portfolio value would be, but you don't just use that number. You set a floor, 85% of last year's withdrawal, and a ceiling, 120% of last year's withdrawal. Example, year 1, $1 million times 5.1% equals $51,000. Year 2, portfolio grows to $1.1 million. 5.1% would be $56,100, but that's above your ceiling. 120% of $51,000 equals $61,200. Wait, $56,100 is actually under the ceiling, so you withdraw $56,100. Actually, let me recalculate. Year 2, the ceiling is $51,000 times 120% equals $61,200. Floor is $51,000 times 85% equals $43,350. 5.1% of new balance equals $56,100, within range, so you take it. If the market crashes and your balance drops dramatically, you might hit that floor of $43,350. If it soars, you might hit the ceiling of $61,200. Who's this is for? People who have some flexibility in their budget and want to participate in market gains while having some protection on the downside. You'll need to accept that your annual paycheck will vary, sometimes significantly. The advantage: over time, this method captures market upside while protecting you from completely running out of money. Strategy number 4, constant percentage or endowment method, 5.7%. Aggressive. This is the highest safe withdrawal rate in Morningstar's research, 5.7%. That's 46% more than the baseline 3.9% rate. On a $1 million portfolio, that's $57,000 in year 1 versus $39,000. That's an extra $18,000 right out the gate. How does it work? Simple. Every single year, you withdraw exactly 5.7% of whatever your portfolio is worth at that moment. Year 1, $1 million times 5.7% equals $57,000. Year 2, portfolio drops to $850,000 to $850,000 times 5.7% equals $48,450. Year 3, portfolio grows to $950,000 to $950,000 times 5.7% equals $54,150. The major advantage is you can never run out of money mathematically because you're always taking a percentage of what's left, and when markets are good, you get to spend more. The major disadvantage is your income will be a roller coaster. In bad market years, you might have to cut your spending by 15 to 20% or more. That's brutal if you have fixed expenses. Who's this is for? People with significant flexibility in their spending. Those prioritizing spending while they're alive over leaving an inheritance, retirees with other stable income sources, pension, Social Security, or annuity covering their basic needs, people who view retirement spending as discretionary, travel, hobbies, gifts to family. According to Morningstar's research, this approach works especially well if your goal is to die with zero or close to it, spending your money on experiences and family while you're healthy rather than preserving capital. So which strategy should you choose? Let me give you a framework. Ask yourself 3 critical questions. Question 1. How important is leaving an inheritance? If leaving money to your kids or a charity is a top priority, you want to be more conservative. The 3.9% baseline or the 4.4% inflation ceiling method will give you the best chance of dying with substantial assets. But if you subscribe to the "you can't take it with you" philosophy and want to maximize your lifestyle, the 5.1% or even 5.7% strategies make more sense. Question 2. How much spending flexibility do you have? This is huge. Run this test. Look at your retirement budget. What percentage is absolutely fixed? Housing, insurance, basic food, healthcare? If 70 to 80% or more of your budget is fixed expenses, you need a stable withdrawal strategy. Go with 3.9 or 4.4%. If only 40 to 50% is fixed because you have significant discretionary spending, travel, entertainment, gifts, dining out, you can handle more volatility. Consider 5.1% or 5.7%. Question 3. Do you have other guaranteed income? This is the game changer most people overlook. If you have Social Security, a pension, or annuity covering your basic needs, your portfolio withdrawals are basically bonus money for enjoying life. In this case, you can absolutely be more aggressive, even going to the 5.7% strategy. But if your portfolio is your only income source, you need to be more conservative. One more critical factor: your portfolio allocation. Here's something Amy Arnott, the portfolio strategist at Morningstar, emphasized in their recent research. All of these withdrawal rates assume a balanced portfolio, typically 50 to 65% stocks and the rest in bonds. If you're 100% in stocks, you're taking on way more volatility, which increases sequence of returns risk. The withdrawal rates drop. If you're 100% in bonds or cash, you don't have enough growth to sustain higher withdrawals. The withdrawal rates also drop. That balanced approach with both stocks for growth and bonds for stability is crucial for making these strategies work. The Guardrails approach, a hybrid solution. Before we move on, I want to mention one more strategy that's gaining popularity: the Guyton and Klinger Guardrails approach. This method combines elements of different strategies by setting guardrails, specific rules for when to increase or decrease your withdrawals based on your portfolio's performance. The rules are: upper guardrail, if your withdrawal rate falls 20% below your initial rate because your portfolio has grown, increase your dollar withdrawals by 10%. Lower guardrail, if your withdrawal rate rises 20% above your initial rate because your portfolio has shrunk, decrease your dollar withdrawals by 10%. You can typically start at 5.2 to 5.6% with this approach. The beauty here is you get to participate in the upside when things are going well, but you have specific rules for cutting back when necessary before you get into dangerous territory. Whose this is for? People who want some of the benefits of dynamic spending, but prefer having clear, predetermined rules rather than recalculating percentages every year. Now, I will mention that financial planner Michael Kitces has argued that the Guyton and Klinger guardrails can be overly conservative and trigger cuts when they're not actually needed. So there's ongoing debate about the exact parameters, but the concept of having guardrails is sound.
Protecting against the biggest risk. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. What if you retire right before a market crash? This is the scenario that keeps soon-to-be retirees up at night. And honestly, it should. Remember that sequence of returns risk I mentioned earlier? Here's the brutal reality. The timing of your retirement matters enormously. If you retire in 2026 and the market drops 30% in 2027, even the most sophisticated withdrawal strategy will hurt. But some approaches give you much better odds of surviving. The strategies that best handle market crashes. 1. The dynamic methods, 5.1 to 5.7%. Counterintuitively, the methods where your withdrawals automatically adjust down during bad years actually give you better protection than the fixed strategies. Yes, you'll have to spend less, but your portfolio won't be permanently damaged. 2. The cash buffer strategy. Here's a tactic that works with any of these methods. Keep 2 to 3 years of living expenses in cash or short-term bonds when you retire. Why? During a market crash, instead of selling stocks at a loss, you spend from your cash buffer. This gives your portfolio time to recover without you having to lock in losses. Example, if you need $50,000 per year, keep $100,000 to $150,000 in a high-yield savings account or money market fund. Replenish it when markets recover. Vanguard's research found this simple strategy can increase your safe withdrawal rate by 0.3 to 0.5% because you're dodging sequence of returns risk. 3. The flexible spending approach. This is more behavioral than mathematical, but it's powerful. Identify which expenses in your budget are truly discretionary. That big trip to Europe, the new car, remodeling the kitchen, these can be delayed during down market years. According to JP Morgan's 2025 research on retirement spending patterns, retirees who maintained flexibility in their discretionary spending had a 25 to 35% better success rate during periods of market volatility. What about annuities? I know this is controversial in the personal finance space, but hear me out. Morningstar's research showed that adding some guaranteed income through an annuity, even just enough to cover your fixed expenses, can dramatically increase your safe withdrawal rate on your remaining portfolio. Why? Because you've essentially eliminated sequence of returns risk on your basic living expenses. Your portfolio becomes true bonus money. I'm not saying to annuitize your entire portfolio. That's usually not optimal. But a partial annuitization strategy, where maybe 25 to 40% of your assets go into an income annuity and the rest stays invested, can be really powerful. You're essentially creating your own pension to cover the basics, then using these dynamic withdrawal strategies on the rest for lifestyle spending. All right, let's bring this home. The 4% rule is broken, or at least it's badly outdated for people retiring in 2025 and 2026. The world has changed, and your retirement plan needs to change with it. Here's your action plan. Step 1. Know your numbers. Calculate your safe withdrawal rate using the 2026 baseline of 3.9% as your starting point. On a $1 million portfolio, that's $39,000 per year. Step 2. Choose your strategy based on your priorities. Want maximum security? 3.9% baseline. Want some flexibility with protection? 4.4% inflation ceiling or 5.1% Vanguard dynamic. Want to maximize spending in early retirement? 5.7% constant percentage. Want clear rules for adjustments? 5.2 to 5.6% Guardrails approach. Step 3. Stress test your plan. Before you retire, model out what would happen if the market drops 30% in year 1. Inflation spikes to 6 to 7% again. You live to 95 or 100. There are free retirement calculators online that can help you, but honestly, this is where working with a certified financial planner can be worth every penny. They can run Monte Carlo simulations showing you the probability of success under different scenarios. Step 4. Set up your cash buffer. Whatever strategy you choose, put 2 to 3 years of expenses in cash or short-term bonds before you retire. This is your shock absorber. Step 5. Plan to review and adjust annually. None of these strategies are set it and forget it. Every year you should recalculate your withdrawal amount based on your chosen strategy, rebalance your portfolio, assess whether your spending plan is still working, and adjust if needed. Here's the thing that nobody talks about. The goal isn't to die with the most money. The goal is to live your best life in retirement without running out of money. These modern strategies give you a framework for balancing those two objectives. The traditional 4% rule tried to do everything: provide steady income, never run out, leave an inheritance, work in all market conditions, and it did none of them optimally. The new retirement math recognizes that different people have different goals, and your withdrawal strategy should match what you actually want from retirement. What's your biggest question? Drop a comment below and let me know which withdrawal strategy makes the most sense for your situation. What's your biggest fear about retirement? Are you planning to retire in the next couple of years, and how are you thinking about this? And if you found this valuable, hit that subscribe button, because I've got more retirement planning deep dives coming, including how to optimize Social Security claiming strategies for maximum lifetime income, the truth about healthcare costs in retirement, spoiler, it's more than you think, and tax-efficient withdrawal strategies to keep more of your money. The retirement landscape has changed. Make sure your plan changes with it. I'll see you in the next video. Make sure to hit subscribe and turn on the notifications bell to get notified when I upload new videos.